Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of A Cup of Cozy. Today is episode 10, which is really exciting. So, we're actually drinking cozy alcoholic beverages today, which we will talk about. And today I am sitting down with Jenn Bartlett. Jenn is a librarian, a reader, and a board game connoisseur. Welcome to the show, Jenn.
I love that you said connoisseur. That's as I have my wares behind me. That is just a great word. A lot of people don't use as much. I've heard person who has many board games, kind of like, why do you have so many board games? But that's much nicer, Kelly. That's so cozy of you to use that word.
It is just a fancy feeling word. So
it is. And it's good to be on. We've been trying to get this together for a number of months. I had surgery and then we connected again. So
yes, it was a while. So I met Jenn like a few years ago now at a library where she is a librarian. And Travis and I were just starting to get into the board game hobby. So we were going to check out some board games, and she saw us standing there for a very long time and came to give us some advice because we probably look like some little lost puppies. But since then, we've now got over 70 games, so it's safe
awesome
to say that it was a gateway.
Yes.
But before we get into the board games, let's talk about what we're drinking. What are you drinking?
Well, we started initially, so I'm double fisting it here. I ransacked my tea drawer. All of my tea was expired. So like my go-tos, we're Earl Grey people in our house, and I have like some special varieties that we've gotten down in Disney and Epcot, all expired. So there was much sadness. So this is just a Bengal Spice, Celestial Seasons Bengal Spice, and because we're feeling like fancy folk, I just have a Josh Cellar. It looks like a lot of wine. It is a lot of wine. Wow. Okay. Heavy pour. Josh Cellar Sauvignon Blanc. I don't know. To me, all wine tastes the same. So a white wine is a white wine, and a red wine. This is wine enthusiasts are going to be like, "What?" and stop the podcast, Kelly. They're just not going to. Who is this lady?
I can't tell the difference either. I don't like expensive wine.
No, it all tastes the same to me by and large, unless it's like really super cheap. Then my mouth knows that it's really super cheap, but they all by and large. Yeah. How about you, Kelly?
So I was going to also have a glass of wine, but that didn't go as planned. The cork is really in there. And I couldn't find, the bottle openers where it's got like the wing things. I couldn't find that one, so I had to use like the normal one that you like wiggle it out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it resulted in an injury. It wasn't cozy. So instead, I grabbed this double IPA Cloud from the fridge from New Park Brewing, and I think it looks very cozy.
It's my kind of color palette right there.
So
yeah,
it's very cute.
Well, cheers, Kelly, to your
cheers.
Your 10th episode.
Thank you. I gotta crack it open. I haven't even done that yet.
Yes. Suppose we should say too that we're recording this at an alcohol appropriate time too, right?
Yeah, it's evening.
Yes.
It's evening. Then we're not recording this in the morning. So, so Jenn, for people who don't know you, can you give your brief introduction?
It's hard to shorten down. So I am a librarian. I work at a somewhat large suburban urban library in Connecticut. I am the head of reference and adult services. I've worked at this particular library for 10 years. But part of my job as the head of reference and adult services is to curate our board game collection and our board game events. We've had board game events since 2015 and are circulating board games since 2017. We have over 1,000 for all ages that you can check out with your free Manchester Public Library card or a library card from anywhere in the state. Connecticut has a really great reciprocal where you could live in Danbury and come to my community and check out as many games as you are willing to drive back and return. But I have spoken nationally on board game related topics in libraries. I've been featured in American Libraries magazine. I wrote for Library Journal for a really long time. I'm a former president of the American Library Association's Games and Gaming Roundtable. And I am a wife, cat mom, dog mom, reading enthusiast, board gamer, and live in an 1832 house. And that might be my dog barking. That's great. We'll just add that ambiance to our podcast here. So, yes, that is me.
Lovely.
Yes.
That was perfect. I didn't know some of those things existed. Obviously, I'm not in the library field.
Yeah, it's library land in Connecticut is pretty small because we're a pretty small state, but there's a lot of great national opportunities too if you're someone who likes being involved like that. So I've had a lot of great experiences in my career so far of talking about board games and how they fit in the library sphere. The library that I work at, we were probably one of the first in the country to really, among the first, to really start circulating such a large number of board games. And we probably have the largest collection in New England. My boss is probably in the country. I'm still waiting for someone to say that they have more than we do. I'm a go big or go home kind of girl. It's okay. As we saw with my half jeez. Well, so my career can be very rewarding, but having hobbies and passions like board gaming, reading, we were talking about my jamming side hustle earlier. I do craft a lot too. Are very rewarding.
Have you always been into board games, or is it something that you came into in your adult life?
Yeah, so in board gaming, I consider myself a non-traditional board gamer. Traditional board gamers, to me, and there's statistics that back this up, tended to be a very white male-dominated space.
Interesting.
And especially in like historical games, war games, miniature games. So for folks who are unfamiliar with those terms, more people know like Warhammer, which Henry Cavill has gotten behind and is going to do either the show or the movie. I can't remember. Wargaming, if you think like Axis and Allies, it's just a base, kind of frame of reference. And then historical games, kind of maybe the ones that you saw your father or grandfather playing, kind of these long multi-hour things on the table. And that's fine that it was that before, but board gaming has really had a revolution in the last 15-20 years. My somewhat fun fact of sorts is my husband and I have been together 20 years. I still look like a baby over here. And when we got together, my husband grew up in a board gaming family, and where they played a lot more of the traditional stuff. Scrabble, Parcheesi, Pictionary, those kinds of games. And we had a card and hobby store near us down in Wallingford, and he would pick up like these little build your own pirate ships. It was Pirates of the Caribbean time, friends. It was a total vibe. And the game was called like Pirates of the Spanish Main. And I ended up with this like little army of pirate ships that were painstakingly put together, and they would break. And then we kind of stopped playing for a while. And when we got married in 2010, my mother bought my husband a game called Battle Cry. Now, Battle Cry is not a new game. It's been around, someone can fact check me on this, but a long period of time. It's not something that I would consider a modern board game at all. But it's essentially about the American Civil War. And my husband was working on his master's in military history in the American Civil War at the time. And he kind of was like, we could play this together. And I went, okay, sure. um, and we did. And I struggled for a while because, I mean, if you don't have those skill sets, if you didn't grow up playing those games, you don't
Yeah.
have those skill sets necessarily as
Mhm.
someone who's spent, 24 years of their lives doing that. Um, so I've really been in the board gaming hobby since 2010. We have like 600 or 700 games in my house. You're seeing parts of them.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. So when you were saying connoisseur, that's why I chuckled.
That's perfect. It's perfect. I was gonna ask, how many you've got, because 70, like it feels like a lot when I say that number out loud, and then I look at the shelves and I'm like, we need way more. Like this is not
Yeah,
enough at all.
it's mood. It's like reading. It's playing board games can be a mood. You're not a mood reader. You're a mood gamer instead, maybe.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, so all these games later, here I am. But and to kind of tell folks, when I talk about the modern board gaming hobby today, I don't mean Parcheesi, I don't mean Yahtzee, I don't mean Pictionary or even Monopoly. There's lots of folks who love those things, and they're classics. They're classics for a reason. I'm not knocking them. They just aren't for me. Although there are some that do
Hmm.
really still hold up. They don't give you a lot of choice in a lot of them. Just very simple dice rolling where you can't. You have no choice. So the modern board gaming hobby, even if you were walking down the aisles of Target, and you wandered through the game aisle, which is pretty substantial, your
Yeah.
eyes would just be feasting on all of these box covers and themes and just a wealth of options for you to play. Um, there's this well-known website in the industry called boardgamegeek.com, kind of like a Goodreads. If folks are familiar with that. So instead of a virtual bookshelf, it's like a virtual game shelf and encyclopedia slash repository slash hold all. Um,
Forum.
forum, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's like over 50,000 board games alone that are on Board Game Geek. So it's a broad, diverse hobby now, much more than it ever was back, like when my dad was playing a game called the American Civil War back in the 70s. It's just different. It's different. And a lot of that has to do with people our age, Kelly.
Yeah.
Playing a lot more games and embracing it and really diversifying the hobby.
Why do you think so many of those early games were so historical in nature?
There actually, I think, have been articles written on this and studies, because traditionally, like when you're thinking of Axis and Allies, a lot of those games were typically played by veterans after they came home
Hmm.
from world wars, or designed by veterans or people who had been in some kind of military conflict, even if they themselves weren't a soldier. Maybe they were an adjutant or something else like that. Um, yeah, I mean, history has a lot of really great opportunities for board game themes, that can be wonderfully inclusive as well too. There's a game called Her Story that's out there, by a publisher called Underdog Games. Their kind of bread and butter is publishing games that anyone could play. But the shtick and the theme of Her Story is that you're kind of putting together a book, a journal of sorts, and your goal is to fill it with 8 women throughout history. And they really did their research. They worked with educators. They worked with like special consultants, to make it a broad, and really worldwide collection of outstanding women throughout history.
That's cool.
Um, it's a really great game.
Was that kind of recent, right?
Yeah, 2022 maybe, about
Hmm.
2 years. It's a great Christmas gift, I think. I'd also describe it as a cozy game too, because it's really kind of easygoing of sorts. It's not super competitive. There's not a lot of conflict in it. You're just having a good time collecting resources, as we will call them in the space. So in this, like, it's different color pieces that, let's say Rosa Parks needs. Maybe she needs 3 red pieces and 4 blue pieces for you to be able to put her into your book. So yeah, that's again, we've had such a shift in the last 15, 20 years, moving away from historical based games, although that was really my bread and butter for a long time. But I'm still an anomaly of sorts. I've been to a historical um, game company, um, and they had a convention, and I was the only woman there.
Oh,
So there's still a lot of work that needs doing in some of these spaces in terms of making it much more inclusive.
that's interesting. We talk about that a lot on this show too. We've had quite a few female gamers on the show, and video gaming is traditionally a male-dominated hobby. And
Mm-hmm.
we've talked a lot about how women are entering that space and how we're making space for women in those spaces. So it's interesting that you see that also in the board gaming space. I've gotten into board games just over the past 3 years, probably. So I feel like I haven't gone that deep to see that because I'm very much entering in the modern world of gaming and haven't looked too far into the history of it. You mentioned that game that your husband said, "Oh, we could play this together," and you weren't sure. So, but what was the game that really got you hooked after that, then, if that wasn't it?
Oh, wow. I really, I suppose was. It was, 2010. My husband and I got married in October. I had moved into our condo that we had purchased earlier in the year. And like, we were 24. We were somewhat fresh out of college. I was finishing up my master's degree. Matt was working towards deciding on getting his master's degree. When you're just married, you bought a condo. You're kind of on the poor side. Um,
Yes.
yeah, you know, although we're millennials, so we're always poor, I guess. Um, So, like, we spent a lot of winter evenings and winter afternoons and weekends playing this gosh darn game. And eventually I came decent enough, or he was taking pity on me. I think sometimes he was taking pity on me, which is fine. I'm over that now. Like, because he wanted me to enjoy playing and he wanted, me to want to play games with him. So it wasn't going to be like, I'm going to crush you every single time. Not a great way to get people into the hobby, my friends. Um, Especially your significant others. That's not good. So I have like super nostalgia over this game. A couple of years later, my mom, who was really, I suppose, very influential in some of our early board game years, bought my husband a game called War of the Ring. So it's this behemoth of a game. It's a huge box. It's like Lord of the Rings in a box. To me, it's if you're a Lord of the Rings enthusiast and love board gaming, this is the Lord of the Rings game to play. But it is tough. It's a tough game. And my husband would set it up, and I'd come home from work, and I'd be like, and
More work.
and set it up, and I'd come home from work and I'd be, uh. Um, so there was a lot of like unintentional resistance on my end to learn this game, which was probably very frustrating for him looking back on it because he just wanted me to sit down and play this with him. Um, but eventually we did, and it's still my favorite game of all time. We're talking 10 years later, because I was being silly on my end and not just going, okay, fine, I'll sit down. Like, here, I'll sit and play this game. But because we've had so many great experiences sitting down at the table and playing this game, a theme that he really loves, and I enjoy. I'm not an enthusiast, although I've done the things, read the books, seen the movies. Um, it's just board gaming to me as a hobby, and you would maybe agree with this, Kelly, is one of these rare instances in our modern world where we sit down at a table, either with our significant other or if we're solo gaming by ourselves, with friends, family, coworkers, people we don't know sometimes, or not on our phones,
Mm-hmm.
or not in front of a screen by and large, and we're enjoying each other's company for a period of time where technology is not involved, and we can socialize with each other, we can get to know each other better, we can get to know ourselves better, because I think sometimes things come out at a table that you're like, oh, huh, I learned that about myself today. Um, and you can learn things too. I mean, that game, Her Story, to me is a prime example, that there can be great learning opportunities, and you can have fun. You can have fun.
Yep.
So much
Yes.
fun. Um, so I don't know what games you've been playing recently that you've really enjoyed. So what games have you enjoyed? I'm gonna have a cup of tea here.
What games have I enjoyed recently? Well, my husband and I have been going to the portal a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They have that big used section,
They do. Yes.
and we've been buying in bulk because they give us a very good discount when we buy in bulk.
Yes.
So we've gotten a lot of new games, um, new to us games,
Yeah.
not new to the world games. One we really like is Res Arcana.
Oh, I love that one. Yeah,
Yes,
that's such a tight game.
engine building.
Yep.
It's got resources like you were talking about before. It's magical.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if I know like the thematic way to win the game. You have to have the best engine. It's an
There's a
engine
certain number
builder.
of cards and points I think you need to have down. It's maybe
Yeah, victory
20
points.
points.
Yeah,
But it's this tight game. I love it at two players. I'm not sure if I've played it with more.
only
There,
played it at two.
and,
So
and, and you can it can be really super snappy too, especially when you've played it enough. But there's lots of replayability in it as well. And a lot of modern board games have that too. I think board gaming in general is a luxury hobby. Um,
and
I
but you can go to the library and get board games.
You can. I haven't talked about that aspect of it yet. We'll get. Um, but sometimes I think people worry about the cost. If there's someone who wants to buy a game, they worry about the
Sure.
cost, and that can be a big issue. But if you're going to play it multiple times with multiple different people, get different experiences out of it, if you do like a cost per play ratio per person, it can be quite cost effective. Or you can go to the library and check them out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But that is true. There's certain games too that they have different modes of play.
Mm.
So different rules, like if you played it for a while and you're getting bored, you could add a new rule set that's already in the book. I like games like that. Although I have so many games that I usually only learn the base rule set and don't do the extra things because you gotta learn a whole new one.
Are you the rules learner in your house, or is your husband?
Uh, I lean towards being the rules learner.
You're doing,
But what's
you're doing God's work, Kelly.
what's interesting is once I learn the rules and I teach it to him, whenever we have to teach it to someone else, I'm like, you teach it. I'm not, I don't, I've lost it.
It's fair. I've heard some people call it like you Dumbledored it, like you just took it out of your brain and you just put it elsewhere.
Yeah, it could be a lot of work to learn new games. Thankfully, like, there's some YouTube channels that have really good videos about how to play games. Some of them even have it on the box. There'll be like a QR code that you could scan, and it'll bring you to the video of how to set it up and how to play it. We were going to play the game Tau Centi
Mm.
the other day because we got it at the sale, and
Mhm.
I really love the art, and I'm really excited to try it. And
Yep.
I was trying to read the book, and I was like, this is too much. So I looked for a video, and the video was an hour long. So we haven't learned that one yet. We
Yeah,
pivoted to
that's
something different.
understandable.
Uh, but not every game. We talked about a lot of heavy games. Not every game
Mm.
is super super heavy like that. So going back to 2020 or whatever year it was that I met you, and my husband and I were new board game babies, you gave us some recommendations. What are your go-to recommendations for people new to the hobby?
Oh, that can be. So I guess a prime example was yesterday at work. Someone came up to the reference desk and was looking for games to play with her 93-year-old grandmother who
Okay.
had recently had a stroke. So there's a lot of questions that need to be asked when it comes to something like that. Kind of, did grandma play games before?
Mm-hmm.
Which is generally one of my first questions that I ask people. Did you play, what kinds of games have you played before? And what was the last great game that you liked to play? Um, then in her particular instance, it was how's grandma's cognition after a stroke, because stroke patients can have varying levels of cognition depending on what part of the brain it affected. Same
Yep.
with like dexterity. Did it affect grandma's dexterity? So we got down to Codename Pictures. We got down to Can't Stop Express. We got down to Pass the Pandas. And we got down to a word game, whose name is I'm gonna remember at like 10 o'clock tonight, Kelly, and I'm gonna message you. What was this one? Um, so Pass the Pandas is this silly, kind of stupid dice game where the faces of the dice are a panda, water, and bamboo. And when you're playing, you give each person equal number of dice. And the object of the game is to not have any dice in front of you. So water droplets
Mm.
are good. When you roll water droplets, they're out of your hand. Don't have them anymore. Pandas, when you roll them, you give them to a friend. Well, they're not really your friend anymore because now they have more dice in their hand. And bamboo, the person after you has to match the number of bamboo that you rolled. Otherwise, they get more bamboo in their hand. And I've essentially just taught you the game. It's like this super fast dice rolling game. It's language independent, which is great. I love
Mm-hmm.
recommending those games, especially in the community that I work in, where there's multiple different languages that are spoken. It's colorblind friendly because the dice,
Shapes.
there are shapes, and it's fast. And it was less than a minute when I taught you the game. So, bing, bang, boom, boom, boom. Codename Pictures, I think, is great. Any of the Codenames games, because you can work on a team, have the word phrases in front of you. There's the person who's trying to give out the clues, and then there's the guessers on the team, which can, depending how good the clue giver is and then the guessers are, can either be great, or if you have my husband as the clue giver and me as the guesser, it goes phenomenally wrong every single time. Any game like that is just bad, and he's like, we need to not be on the same team. This is why we do this. And that's a game you could probably find at Target. And then Can't Stop Express has been around since 1980. It's got like a Yahtzee style mechanic where you're trying to roll combinations of numbers anywhere from 2 to 12, and you score more points when you fill in boxes that are either 2 or 12, because those are always the outliers, right? And then there's numbers that are like, you don't want those numbers. So that's a great like bridge for some people who've played a lot of Yahtzee, and they're used to rolling dice and filling in numbers. But there's, oh God, for folks who want more recommendations, if they go on YouTube and they type in my name and WFSB once a month on a Thursday, I have a segment on one of our local channels here in Connecticut where I teach the hosts a board game. And a lot of those recommendations, a lot of those are games that I would recommend to folks who are new to the hobby, because they're often easy rule sets, not a lot of components, and oh, I remember the other game. Okay, I'll swing back around to that. It's like cat, cat, cat. And so those are great recommendations. So the last game was something called So Clover. It shocks
Yes.
a lot of people when I say I'm a librarian and I hate word games. I do. I just do. I hate them. I hate them. But So Clover is this cooperative word game where everyone is handed essentially a plastic clover and 4 cards, and you put them down in the spots on your clover, and 2 of the words are on each part of the petal, if we'll say it. So there's 4 petals, 3 petals, and you have to put down a clue word, and then the guesser for the round gets your clover, but you've taken off all the guessing words, and they have to put the word cards in the right places.
Mm-hmm.
I really like So Clover. Again, it's really bad when my husband's the guesser and he has to guess what words I've put down because, again, we've been together 20 years. We know each other really well. And it's chaos. And he looks at me like, what? Where did that come from? What planet are you on right now, Jen? And I'm like, I don't know. Planet Jen, apparently. But So Clover, and all of these games to me are very accessible in terms of their rule set. Easy to teach too, which I think can be a hurdle some people encounter when they're new to the hobby. They'll pick up a game off the shelf and they're not
Too
there
much.
yet. It's too much. One of the things I do with the games at the library is I use Board Game Geeks. They have like a weighted scale where 1 is a very, very easy game and 5 is a strap in. You're going to be here 8 hours. It's going to have a gazillion components. Your brain is going to melt out of your right ear and you're going to be happy when it's done. So I put like difficulty stickers on the games because I was noticing when we first launched the collection that people were picking up games and returning them very quickly. And it was because it was something like Dominant Species, which is one of those 5 to 6 hour games. It's really ideally 6 players you need. It's got dinosaurs on the front, so I think little kids were going up and going, look, mommy, dinosaurs!
The covers get you. You can't judge a game by its cover.
Yeah, especially not that one. And it's maybe this game maybe has 1,000 pieces in it, and it would come back, and it was the hottest messes you would ever see. Just components all over, like someone game vomited the pieces all over. So I mean, always do your research on games. If you're in Target, you can Google them, go on Board Game Geek, and see if it's something you would like. There's tons of videos out there, like Kelly mentioned, on how to play or reviews. Especially if you have a more limited budget, you really want to buy a game that you know that you're going to like.
Yeah. And think about player count too. Who are you playing it with? Like, I like your example of playing with the 90-something-year-old mother, but somebody might want to get a game that they could play with their kids, which you could certainly do too. Travis and I have bonded with our nieces by playing some board games with them. They've gotten into board games recently.
Yay.
They really enjoy Pretty Princess. That is a definite favorite. But I like that too, that it's accessible, that you could play board games with a bunch of different age groups. You could get really mature about it and have to play a game with a group of adults that's really thinky and strategic, or you could do something more fun that you could play with kids. I love that aspect of the gaming hobby.
I'd agree. I think it's one, they have wonderful games out there for kids as young as 2 years old. Haba is always my go-to kind of gold standard. They're a German company. Their boxes are
Rhino
bright.
Hero.
Yes, Rhino Hero, and I love Rhino
That's my
Hero.
go-to game with kids.
I love it
It's
for
a good one.
adults. I brought that on WFSB, and it was like a total hit. It's like a dexterity stacking game, where you're trying to build this tower, essentially this tower as tall as you can without the tower toppling over. But their boxes are really bright and colorful, and children love like chunky pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, you have like the games that the 93-year-old grandma can play too. So that's I love that about this hobby, and many of them don't require technology too, because for some folks that's a barrier of entry too.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they don't have Wi-Fi in their house. Maybe they don't have the things, to play computer games or video games or a phone game even. Um, Either because they can't afford it, they don't know how to use it. Maybe in their area they just don't have it. But as long as you have a table, you could sit down at a table. And sometimes you don't even need a table. A game like Happy Salmon, which is I recently watched a top 10 of stupid but good games, and Happy Salmon is one of those ones. I don't even think let me see if I can find it quickly.
I went to a work conference recently, and they played Happy Salmon at the conference.
So the original Happy Salmon came in this little salmon pouch, 3 to 8 players, and everyone has the exact same deck. And in the deck are Happy Salmon, and we'll talk about that. Pound It, another Happy Salmon, a Switcheroo, and a High Five. So it's simultaneous play, which some people go, what? And I mean, you played it. It's chaos. It's chaos. You could play a game in less than a minute. You're like up and moving too, which is really great. I played games where I'm on the floor laughing, ready to pee my pants. Like, it's just because you're shouting, you're going, Happy Salmon, Happy Salmon, Happy Salmon, Happy Salmon, Happy Salmon. And then meanwhile, Kelly's going, pound it, 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 pound it. And you're trying to find a match. Otherwise, you just give up the card and move on to another one. And I'm going, high five, high five, high five, high five. And Kelly's going, Happy Salmon. And we're like, wow. That it doesn't come in this fun packaging anymore, which is kind of a crime.
I know, it's in a box now.
It's in a box. But that's a game like you could teach probably your nieces, Kelly. Mm-hmm. And I think, for an older person too, as long as they're able to move around and they have some mobility, they could play it too. So those are great opportunities just in life when you can have intergenerational activities, because again, as we get more siloed as a world, as a human race, more isolated, more lonely too. I'm sure you've talked about loneliness a lot in your podcast.
Needing to find community through these different cozy hobbies.
Yeah. That you can have those experiences with these. That to me is really kind of my plug in general about board gaming, is really the human experience that we share with each other. You can leave a table feeling really great and motivated and inspired and cozy, of course. There's a game called, oh boy, I'm not going to find it fast enough. With the cute dragons.
Oh, Flamecraft?
Yes, Flamecraft, which is
I really want that one.
Which is...
I don't have it.
Plus coziness, the artwork is just,
yes, it's adorable.
Adorable little dragons, and they're going around all these shops and patronizing the shops, and you're doing things. There's a game called Fika. I may be mispronouncing that. It's a Swedish breakfast thing. It's a 2-player game, but you're trying to it's essentially like a cup of coffee and a pastry. It's like part of the card play is the cups of coffee and, let's say, a Swedish pastry. Okay. There's another one called Order Overload Cafe, kind of chaotic, also kind of cozy in a chaotic way. Which
I think Everdell is very cozy. It's also adorable.
Yeah. So what cozy games do you have in your collection? Everdell?
No, I don't have Everdell. I wish that we had it, but I don't know. I don't know why I haven't bought it yet, but I haven't. What do I have that's cozy in the collection? We have Tiny Towns.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cozy. You have these little resource cubes, and you are making different polyomino patterns and shapes with the different color cubes to build little buildings in your town, and they're tiny. And they're these chunky wooden pieces, so I love the chunky woodenness. Azul is another good cozy one. Abstract game. We have the stained glass of Citra one,
Mm-hmm.
but we played the basic one first. That's another good. You're just playing with these. I like tactile things. Apparently, those chunky tiles that you're placing, and it's too complicated to describe in a podcast, but it's good, nice and cozy. We like play that a lot when we're sitting out on the back patio.
It is a great
It's all
one.
nice outside.
The cards, there's no cards. They're not going to fly away in the wind. That's the great.
Yes, yes. So many options for cozy games or chaotic games. A chaotic game my friends really like playing from our collection is Sheriff of Nottingham. It's
Yeah.
not my favorite, but like my friends love that game. It's a game where you're like trying to decept people and bribe people, and you're a merchant bringing things to the market, and you put them in this little bag and you give it to whoever is playing the sheriff and say, I'm bringing in 3 cheese, but you might actually have 2 cheese and 1 apple, and you're trying to make a fast one.
Playing
Yeah,
that one
people
with
love that.
teenagers.
Oh yeah, I bet that's a good time.
Because they're like, what? I could be deceptive to my friends and get away with it? Oh my god. Yeah, teenagers love that one. Yeah, I don't think we own Sheriff anymore. I think we ended up selling ours off. It's usually just my husband and I playing games, so Sheriff requires 3 to 5,
3.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, those kinds of games ebb and flow in our house depending on where we have space, or how often we're gaming with other people. Yeah. So, but the library owns it. It's always my plug for folks. If there's something that you want to play and maybe you don't have a portal near you, you have no friendly local game store near you. Don't want to go to Target to buy it. Maybe Barnes and Noble doesn't have a game section where you are. Check your library. It's a great way to try before you buy, and it's like a great equalizer too.
Mm-hmm.
That anyone can check out games and try them and play them. It doesn't have to be just anyone who can afford them. That's a
Yeah.
big thing. That's a really big thing for me. The equity and access part of it. We really try to make this hobby equitable and as inclusive as possible. Again, we're in a position where we can splurge, maybe once or twice a year on a more expensive game. But if you're a single mom working 2, 3 jobs, couple of kids, you're not buying them a board game. You're going to buy food for the table. So
Yeah.
if you can go to the library and do that, that's the magic to me. That's really the magic.
I mean, I love that about libraries in general. I'm very big in supporting your local libraries because there's so much entertainment there
Mm-hmm.
for folks to get for free, not just books, not just board games. You could check movies out from the library. Um, the South Windsor Library has a seed library. So
Mm-hmm.
you could get like little succulent saplings. So you could grow your own succulents and things like that. There's just so many things. So that kind of brings me into the community aspect because you run, programming at the library where folks come in and play board games and things like that. What's your experience been with that? How have you seen it shape the community, or are there any really standout moments from those events for you?
Yeah, so I mean I have 9 years worth of events to look back on. When I pitched this to my boss, I had a pretty clear mission in mind. Um, I wanted it to be for millennials, essentially, for folks 18 to 35. I'm now past the 35 range now, but that's fine. Um, we're millennials. We're in the age range. We're in that range. Um, Traditionally, millennials drop it. Traditionally, in general, I'll back up and say people grow up using the library. Maybe in high school, they kind of start to drop off. They're doing finals, they're in sports, they're in bands, dance class, theater, whatever. They use the library in college, probably. And then, like, from college, if they go to college, to maybe if they decide to have kids, a lot of folks in that, like, range stop using the library for whatever reason. Life, maybe they're getting married, they've moved, they're buying homes, starting new jobs. Again, just life in your 20s. So I wanted an event that people my age would really want to come and enjoy. So that was point A. Point B was I really wanted it to be as welcoming, especially for women, as much as possible. I've had some really weird experiences at some board game stores across the country where I've gone with my husband, and maybe Kelly, you've had this experience as well, where they're perhaps more old school and they see my husband and they only talk to my husband about the board games and they're asking him what stuff he wants to play. And they look at me and they're like, oh, little Miss is here with her husband. It's great. I'm like, oh, are we ready now? Because we're going to go there. We're going to go there. Where I've been kind of, ignored. And I don't love that. I don't love that. So, in libraries, we don't believe in that, and that's not our MO. So a library is a great space to have an event where literally everyone is welcome. But I wanted
Mm-hmm.
people who were the non-traditional gamers, like I mentioned before, to feel safe, to feel welcomed, to feel like they had a spot in the community. Um, Other great things are we're free. You don't have to pay to sit and play like you do in some board game stores or cafes. They're businesses. Of course, they have to make their money. I'm not knocking that. But again, in libraries, our mission is not that. We're not money makers. We're not looking to profit. Um, so I've had some really great experiences over the year. I've kind of, as I joke to some people, kicked out the bad eggs. I'm down here making a kicking motion. I had some folks who, like, their behavior wasn't quite savory. So I think I just gave them the Jen stank face, or they got the Jen bad vibes. Like, don't show up again. Um, I've had grandmas, like not the 93-year-old grandma, but I've had some grandmas show up. I even had a homeless person who was coming for a really long time. Again, I really reiterate this sometimes because where else in our spaces, our public spaces, can we really interact with people who are not like us
Yeah.
and who and you can sit down at a table and maybe know no one at that table, and by the end know someone a little better, or know a little bit more about what's going on in someone's life whose life is nothing like yours. So especially for, like, that homeless person, that was I can't even imagine, like, what that kind of experience was for them to be seen and for them to feel like they were part of something and to
Mm-hmm.
be part of community, like kind of the larger community. Because the homeless community in and of itself they have their community too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but again, it's the magic. That's like the magic to me, really.
Yeah, it brings everybody together. It puts you all on an equal playing field.
It does. It does. And there's so few spaces that we have left that are like that. that's one of the wonderful things I love about my job. That's one of the reasons I love the library so much. I love what I do. Um, that again, you walk in the door, we're not asking you where you live, we're not asking you how much money you make, we're not asking you any of like those questions. We're not asking you to pay a fee. Most
We
libraries,
don't even got late fees anymore.
yeah, most libraries, especially here in Connecticut, don't even have late fees anymore. Unless you lose something, that's a different story. But um, yeah, it's there's been a lot of really great stuff. Once a year in September, I host a local game designer and publisher day, and last year I had 60 people, which was the most I'd ever had. Typically at events, I have anywhere from like 18 to 47 adults, which is a lot. But I had 60, and it was one of the moments in my career where I looked out on a sea of people who were brought together by this one hobby and one passion, and they were supporting each other. They were laughing and enjoying and having a good time. They were learning new things, and it was really like, it hit me right in the.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Not to be cheesy, but it really is. Like,
Yeah, I've had a lot of great
yeah.
opportunities with this event. Once a month on a Saturdays, if you're local to Connecticut, where I've supported a lot of designers and publishers. And that's always been big to me too, because we need to be supporting each other and
Yeah.
like, and really kind of putting in the work and helping each other out, because I think we are missing that in our human experience today too. The kindness part of it.
Yeah, I can agree with that. People are very self involved with social media and things, whereas social media has another great side of being able to build community, but if it's used in a proper way. Yeah, that's really interesting. I know there's an event tomorrow at the library.
There is, yes.
I
Yeah.
will be there.
All right, awesome.
In the show notes, we will put links to maybe some of the Facebook groups
Mm,
for these library things in case anybody is local, and more resources like Board Game Geek and maybe just other places where you might be able to find your own groups.
mm,
I know we're getting close at time, but I do want to ask you this question because I know I have a lot of readers that listen. Did you
mm.
always want to be a librarian?
I took kind of a circuitous path to it. My grandmother had taken a picture of me at her house sitting on like one of those little kid chairs
Mm-hmm.
with a book in my hand. And she had it actually in a frame. And I should have known then. I was a kid that played bookstore a lot. I was always an avid reader. I grew up an only child, so books were kind of my friends and siblings when I didn't have them.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a very tumultuous household, so that was kind of like mainstay. Books were
Comfort your
always,
nostalgia
yeah, they were
too.
my cozy things that
Mm-hmm.
were there for me when other people were not, or things were really bad. Um, so I no, I graduated and went to Quinnipiac and got a bachelor's in print and journalism and a bachelor's in history. But that was 2008. Now we all know how old I am. It's great. It's fine. Um, and if your listeners are old enough to remember 2008 and the blank show that 2008 was, and how the economy just went. There were no jobs. There were no jobs. But my mom had found an ad in the paper back when one did those things, um, for a page job at the Cheshire Public Library here in Connecticut. And I went, okay, fine. Like, I needed a part-time job. I've always been
Mm.
someone who's worked. I interviewed. They hired me not for the page job, but for like a circulation, so the front desk position. I graduated in 2008, ended up working for the local newspaper, and I had done a lot of work in my summers at that local newspaper. They were going to pay me like peanuts. It was really crappy hours, just a lot of drama that I, at 22, was like, no, thank you, sir. Um, so I had loved what I had been doing at that library. And I kind of was like, well, okay. I need a master's degree to get hired as a librarian. That's pretty typical. A lot of folks don't know
Mm-hmm.
that. Some places you can get hired as a librarian without a master's in library science, but more and more you do need it, and I've always put in quotation marks to make the big bucks. So I went and got my master's degree and ended up getting a full-time job 10 years ago where I currently am. So no, I did not always know that. I probably should have known that. Um, but it took
Well,
a
it's
little bit.
about more than just the books, though.
It is.
You know, you have to have, like you've been talking about, the passion for the community and equity and giving people access to things. That's, I think, a huge part about, being a librarian that people forget is a part of the job.
Yeah, I for me the jump from journalism to librarianship wasn't a big jump. I think in journalism you have to have a lot of curiosity, and be able to talk to people too.
Mm-hmm.
Be able to sit and interview them like you're doing right now and listen. And we do that a lot in my line of work. You have to
Mm-hmm.
ask like the right question sometimes, or get to the right question. Um, and even in journalism too, sometimes you're seeing and interviewing people at their best, but sometimes you're also not. You're seeing and interviewing people when they're at their worst. Something major and tragic has happened to them, which again I see a lot at work. So, but there's always we joke the things they don't teach us in library school. They don't teach us how to unclog a toilet. They don't teach us crisis management. They don't teach us social work. It's a field that is evolving a lot. Books are still our bread and butter, though.
Mm-hmm.
We are Libraries are still book places. We have all of the other things, to kind of tempt you, reel you in. But that is that is really the heart of what we are. And the truer heart to me of a library is really the people.
Mm-hmm.
You have to like people to work in a library. You
Yes.
can't just be like,
Yes.
I don't like people. Can I still be a librarian? No, no.
I
Oh,
know. I know. A lot of people don't think about it. A lot of people who really like books are like, I'm just going to spend time with books all day and I'm going to be a librarian. But it's not the reality.
it's
Uh,
not. It's not. I mean, I would actually wish some days I spent more of my time with books and readers. Even board gamers who came in, and I did a lot more board game advisory. Those are the aspects that I really truly love. Just like any other job, there's always the paperwork or the behind the scenes thing that don't involve like the books or the people. Yeah.
but you
So,
still like it.
well, by and large, for the most part, I'm there 10 years, so I think I'm there and settled. So I did want to ask you, Kelly, what you are reading
Sure.
right now for
Oh, what am I reading
your.
right now? I've been reading, which I need to renew because it just stopped showing up on my Kindle. A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, the first
Mm,
in the Wayfarer series. I'd call it cozy sci-fi.
mm,
It's by, I forget her name. My goodness. The author who wrote the book about the tea monk
mm.
recently that came out like a couple years ago. It was really popular. It's a skinny little novella. But this was, a book series that she had started years ago. Becky Chambers, I think that's her
Oh,
name.
yes, I do know that name.
Um, and I'm loving it. It
Mm,
is, the characters like are so lovable, and it's the type of book I want to read to spend time with the characters
mm,
rather than I want to read to get to the end.
mm.
And it's hard to find a book that gives you that experience. So yes, I'm nerding out over that one right now.
That's
How
cool.
about you?
As I had previewed, I brought my samples. Last summer, I think as a librarian, I felt like there were things I had to read. like
Mm.
books that I was done, and I was like, yeah, that was a great one, and they were great, but my enjoyment of reading had really fallen off in the last 4 or 5 years, we'll say. And last summer I reinvigorated my love of kind of just focusing on what I wanted to read. Now for work,
Mm-hmm.
there's stuff I just have to read. I run like one book club full time and then two part time. And one of them is a more serious book club, and the other two are more fun and fanciful. Um, so I recently started this one, Truth According to Ember, Danica Nava. It's one of the first Indigenous author romance books.
Ooh.
So I hadn't realized that none had been published before, which shame on me. So it's gotten really great reviews. Romance is kind of like my wheelhouse now these days. It's it's like my Skittles for my brain. Or peanut butter cups or whatever. That I just Life is so hard these days that I think whether you're playing board games or reading, you need to make that for yourself and not be
Mm-hmm.
playing something you think you need to be playing or reading something you think you need to be reading. Um,
Yeah.
and and I think a lot of folks have reinvigorated their enjoyment, especially of reading, because they're breaking free of those bonds of things like I have to read this because blah 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 says so. And romances have really been it for me. I'm also reading a ton of fantasy. On Hoopla, I'm listening to Ninth House, Me Bardugo. It's like a fantasy mystery. Um,
It's like dark academia too, yeah.
yeah, did you read it?
I didn't read it, but I mean it's on my TBR.
It's on Hoopla, so there you go.
Yes, I talk about Hoopla a lot on the show,
Oh,
so
great.
giving it another plug.
Yep.
Everybody needs to download it. It's great.
Yes.
You all can find the links probably everywhere on my socials.
Yeah. Yeah. Gotta have your library card. Um,
Yes,
but yeah, I mean, once you have that, you're golden.
it's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's dark academia. It takes place down at Yale. Bardugo apparently went to
Mm-hmm.
Yale. Um, but she's like talking about Mamoons, and she's talking about like all of these streets and things. Like if you're familiar with New Haven and Yale at all, you're like, oh my god, I know that. Oh my god, I know that. Um, so the verdict for me is out on it. I don't know how I feel yet, but I'm loving kind of the New England, Connecticut, New Haven vibes in particular that it's throwing my way.
Nice.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's
My most recent Hoopla listen was just out of the blue. Sometimes I'll just go through there and scroll and not have a plan, because it's free
it
with
is.
my library card.
It is.
Um, I listened to the Delegate Dream Department Store.
Hmm.
It is translated from Korean, I believe. It's a very popular book in Korea. It was so magical and whimsical and amazing. It's basically about this department store, but they sell dreams, and you only go there when you go to sleep and you buy a type of dream that you want to experience.
Yeah.
And like animals go there, and babies, and like all types of people. And it was just so whimsy. I loved it. One of my 5-star reads from this year. And
Okay.
I am very picky at giving out my 5 stars.
There's been a lot of really great translations coming over from Korea and Japan in particular. Just really great. There was one coming out this summer that was a translation from the Japanese to English. It was like cats who could talk who ran a coffee shop. I was like, sign me up. Sign me up. Sign me up. Now I can't. Again, I can't remember the title. It'll be maybe later or not at all when I remember.
I'm gonna have to look that one up. I need some more. My husband and I are going to Japan next month. So I've been reading a lot of manga in preparation,
Mm-hmm.
which the library has a great selection of
Yeah.
in Manchester. Not where
Me
I
too.
live. Not a good selection. There's just so much. Okay. We're at like an hour though, so I don't want to keep you too long or have this episode go on for 2 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe another time, Jen, you'll have to come back and we'll have to talk just about books.
Oh,
A
that's
whole nother topic.
precious. Like, ooh, the listeners, I'm making the heart hand. So, yeah, I think it's great that reading has become in vogue again, popular again.
Yeah.
Especially people our age, we're really refinding our love of reading.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's been through Bookstagram, Book Talk, going to your library and talking to your librarians, friends, family, and the people are making the space for that. I mean, reading to me is the ultimate cozy like thing.
Oh,
Sitting on
so
the
cozy.
couch, under a blanket, maybe a glass of wine or an old fashioned, dare I say. My dog, across my lap. It's any season. I even have like on our front porch, like one of those kind of hammocky chairs. That's my reading chair.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
My husband's sitting outside reading right now. Um, while it's a solitary activity, I think it's so refreshing for our souls just to read.
And
Well,
you learn so much from
yeah,
stories.
you do.
Which
Yeah.
I lost my love of reading in college. I was an English major.
Oh,
So
well, there you go. Yeah.
I had to read everything I didn't want to read.
Yeah. You get
But
burned out.
then, yeah, got back into it as an adult. At first, I was like, why should I read fiction if it's not going to teach me anything? And then I realized, wow, nonfiction is pretty boring if that's the only thing you read. So I started reading fiction again. I was like, oh my gosh, I was missing this big piece of
Mm-hmm.
my life. So yes, I'm so glad that reading has become, like you said, more in vogue than it was a few years ago. And I want to get more people into board games too, because that is also a cozy hobby. There could be a lot of reading involved or creativity involved in certain games, and it allows you to have that community aspect and those human connections that you might not get while you're reading. So
Yeah.
pair the two together. I'm a big hobby stacker. I've
Oh,
got way too many hobbies,
oh,
so
yes. Yep.
you don't have to be one or the other.
No, you don't.
But let's get into the game.
Yes.
We've got to play the game.
Yes. All right. I'm ready, Kelly.
I think you're gonna like it. Imagine this is gonna sound not fun because I feel like imagine you're at work.
Imagine what work?
You're at work.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
Okay, but no, you are like we'll say you're running a cute little bookstore.
Okay.
You're running a bookstore / board game store.
I feel like that's what my new dream lately is. So yeah, tell me more, Kelly.
And you're getting a lot of readers coming in, but they don't know what game they should play.
Mm.
So all you're going to get is their preferred genre to read. And you
Okay.
have to recommend a game to this customer based on their preferred reading genre.
Okay, we can do this. Yeah. All right. Here we go. Yes.
All right, and there is how many? I got 6.
Okay, I'm ready. Yes.
All right.
Strapped in. I'm ready.
First customer comes in. They're like, I love sci-fi. Read Project Hail Mary. Great. What board game should I play?
I think this is funny that you bring this up. We'll talk about this after. There is. Oh, I'm looking around a room. Oh, you might like Dune Imperium. So Dune Imperium is based off of Dune, the book, which you may have read already. It's what we call a deck builder. So everyone starts off with the same hand of cards, and there's a board in front of you, and you have a couple of player pawns where you can do particular actions and get more cards sometimes, get more sand, because of course this is Dune, and we're going to have sand as a resource. And then there's going to be a bigger central part of the board where we're going to battle it out sometimes with our little mini cubes for domination, either for points sometimes, intrigue cards, because the Bene Gesserit are part of this, or and over a series of rounds, the first player to 10 points is winner, winner, chicken dinner. Your fun fact, Kelly, is I haven't done this in a year. I had on the Dice Tower, so if you go on YouTube, the Dice Tower is probably one of the biggest board game channels in YouTube land. And they had a variety show called Board Game Breakfast. And my bread and butter on there, I had a segment called From the Page to the Table, where I paired books and board games together. So, Kelly,
Oh!
you didn't even know this.
No, I didn't. I haven't gone super deep into the Dice Tower. I know I'm getting on another tangent, but my favorite board game YouTube channels: Foster the Meeple, love them, and Jenna Rose Beasley, the Board Game Garden.
Oh, yes. I know her as Board Game Garden.
So aesthetic.
I agree. She's very cozy. I think just how she presents stuff. Yeah, and Foster the Meeple is great because it's a husband and wife team, too. You're getting really great perspectives from both. I use a lot of their reviews when I'm highlighting games for Silk City Board Game Group, because I always try to put a review, and almost every event I have a Foster the Meeple review.
Yeah, they're great. And ThinkerThemer.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I love them too. Did I use one of their reviews? No, I don't remember why I didn't use one of their reviews, but yes, I love them too.
Right, back to the game.
Tangent.
That was a great first recommendation. Okay. Love it. We're going to have to put the link to that series in the show notes as well. All right. Next customer comes in. All they buy from you is memoirs.
Yeah, so we can use her story here. So her story is an easygoing game, 1 to 4 players. You can probably play a game in less than 30 minutes. You are, what you are trying to do is fill in your journal. First person to have 8 women in their journal is the winner. But along the way, you're collecting your resources and learning about these women. So on the front of the card is like the very beautifully illustrated picture of the woman who's featured. And then on the back is her biography. So great learning opportunities. I would think someone playing this game would find a new person they'd want to read a memoir.
Love it. So great. Okay. Got the romanticy girly coming in. She reads Sarah J. Maas. She's reading all the book talk books about fairies doing it.
I mean, I have an ACOTAR and Throne Glass tattoo over here, so I mean, they're my kind of people.
I definitely have fallen into that category and many a times.
Oh, so, yeah. Yes. Hey, we want dragons. We probably want dragons if we're reading Fourth Wing. Fairies, well, fae. I mean, if you're in the know, we know they're really fae. They're not fairies. With the wings. That's my mother-in-law. I got my mother-in-law to read A Court of Thorns and Roses recently.
Oh my gosh, my mother-in-law read it. I haven't even read it yet.
Yeah, so it's gonna be really interesting when she gets to Silver Flames. I don't want to have those conversations with my mother-in-law. So there we go about that. Right. Oh, well, a fun fact of sorts for my romanticy folks is that there actually was a Throne of Glass board game called Embers of Memory. Osprey published it. It's not something that's in print anymore, so I couldn't offer it to my person who's there. But they might like, all right, Ashes. Ashes is a 2-player dice rolling head-to-head game where you pick a person, and there actually is someone who does have like fairy. They're more like traditional with the wings, fairy. You're essentially trying to knock each other out, but it's definitely really super fantasy based, and each person so there's like your mage, and it's an outstandingly diverse group of mages that you can choose from. The artwork is by Fernanda Suarez, who I 100% recommend you look up afterwards. Her artwork is like mind-blowingly beautiful. But you're in this fantastical world. Sometimes you might have a dragon in your deck as one of the conjurations that you can come along with. So I do love Ashes. Ashes is a great game.
All right.
Super chunky, colorful dice.
Yes. Love me chunky pieces.
Yeah, same.
Another satisfied customer. Next one comes in. They see that what you're reading, and they're like, "Oh, I love Dark Academia." Ninth House. What's that really popular one? The one that's based on Shakespeare. I haven't read it, but I have it, and I cannot remember what it's called.
Atlas 6 was kind of a Dark Academia.
Yeah, Atlas 6 is another one. It's not the one I was thinking of. But...
I like almost DNF'd it. It's a very unpopular opinion. My husband actually did DNF it. But that was on Hoopla or Libby, and I listened to it. I'm going to go run and get, because I do have I have one. I'll be back.
Okay.
So for I should run and get all of these that I'm talking about. So this is level 99 games. You are mages. There's a lot of mages going on this time. Mages and students in an academic setting, really kind of a college setting. This is like an under the radar game. You're casting spells. You are looking to add people to like helpers to your kind of tableau area of sorts. And it's great. Level 99 specializes in kind of anime style games. So for someone who likes that as well, that's their shtick. That's what they do. So I love Argent. It's Argent the Consortium. And it takes place in a university.
Love it.
Right, I'm ready.
Thriller / horror. This person is always getting the new thriller book that's coming out. Let me think of one. Gone Girl, one of their favorites. Also like some Stephen King.
For those folks, if they are a solo gamer, readjusting myself over here, there's this wonderful game called Final Girl.
So I want that one so bad.
Yeah, there's this trope in Horrorland. For my horror folks, they already know this, but for folks who don't, in a lot of horror movies, there's the final girl, where she's the one who's left everyone else has been and she is the one who is standing against the big baddie monster, gross thing, icky, whatever. So Final Girl plays off of that. There's a base box that you need to have, and then they're like little video cassette kind of style things. I just added Final Girl to the library's collection, and it was the Happy Camper Trail or Happy Trails pack, which basically is a play on the Jason ones. So Friday the 13th. My husband has all of the Final Girl things. You can play it cooperatively. It doesn't have to exclusively be a solo experience, but Final Girl is one of the best games that's out there in that genre.
Really need to get my hands on that. I'm going to have to put myself on the list at the library.
Yeah. Put it on hold. Yeah, no, it was when I put it in the catalog last week, I think it was one of the first things that got checked out. My husband plays it a lot. It's a great game.
Really great art too. And yeah. I like the mix and match element of that you could pair a Final Girl with a different like monster or the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
Just really cool. All right. Last customer comes in. High fantasy. They're reading a lot of Brandon Sanderson. They're all up in the Cosmere. You recommend? So
there are a couple of Brandon Sanderson board games that are out there. And of course, I don't own it anymore, but there's a one that's based on, I'm going to have to Google this because the old brain is, it's called The Adventure Stormlight Archives. This is a great one because it's a Brandon Sanderson Stormlight Archives themed game. But I love it because it is good for like RPG players, so role playing gamers who want to kind of bridge between that and more tabletop board games. So you're going along, and everyone starts off kind of with like this hero heroine, and you're going through different rounds and building up your story. So you're rolling runes, and the runes allow you to get more chapters in your story. Sometimes they help you defeat monsters or baddies. And by the end of the 3 rounds, I think it is, you'll have your character, and you've like built your character from there.
Oh, okay.
So it's very light on board game mechanics, I would say. It's even very light on game mechanics in general. But it's great artwork, and if you're already an enthusiast of the series, you'll like, my husband has read all of them. He was like, oh, that character, oh, that situation, oh, that artwork. And I haven't read them, so I think it's something a Sanderson fan would appreciate.
Cool. All right, 6 satisfied customers. You did it. You did it
Yeah.
flawlessly.
Yeah, like I
That was
do
great.
it for a living of sorts some days, right?
Yeah, but not this time. It was a game, you know.
Yes, that's true. Though you had me on my toes. I was like, oh, wait. So good. It's a test of knowledge for sure. I like. Yes.
Lovely. Well, Jenn, thank you so much for sitting down, chatting with me, being on the show, introducing me to the wonderful world of board games in the first place.
Excellent.
It was a great time. We'll have to have you back to talk books and other things as well.
Oh,
Jam making, you know?
yes. Oh, yeah. That's like, talk about cozy old school hobbies. That's like, yeah.
That is like quintessential cozy. Cottagecore
Oh, yeah.
coziness.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
let the people know where they can find you.
By and large, on social media, I am the board game librarian. I have a website, technically, theboardgamelibrarian.com. You can always email me, especially if you are a patron in the wild and you're like, wait, I can have games in my library? What? I've helped people like across the world, help get like proposals going to help them get games in their own public library.
Oh,
That's a
that's
really
really cool.
fulfilling part of my job. So that's theboardgamelibrarian@gmail.com. And just like visit your libraries, folks. Go and visit them and use them. Your taxpayer dollars pay for them. And you get so much bang for your buck at your local library, even if you only ever check out books. So, yay!
Great. I was going to ask you what you want to leave the audience with, but I think you just did it.
Yeah, go visit your library.
Perfect. Love it. All right, Jenn, thank you so much. And thank you, listeners, for listening to this episode. And we will see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.